Good evening. I will call to order the City of West Bend Licensing Board for December 21st at 6:25. Note that we have two items on the agenda. First being approval of the minutes, the Licensing Board regular meeting minutes for December 7th, 6:25.
Motion to approve.
And I'll second. Any comments or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then moving on to agenda items for consideration. Number 2, reserve Class B combination license for Saloon Royale LLC, Saloon Royale, 243 North Main Street.
Motion to approve.
Second. Any comments on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And being no further business for the licensing board, I'll adjourn by the call of the chair.
I would like to call to order the Board of Public Works. We have two items on the agenda. Number 1, Board Public Works regular meeting, approval of the minutes for December 7th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 2, contract for municipal engineering services. Good evening, Max.
Good evening, thank you. This item is a proposal from staff to, a recommendation from staff to award a contract to Concord Engineering Group so they continue providing municipal engineering services to the city of West Bend. Our collaboration with Concord Engineering started in 2013. We went through different contracts with them. We had two-year contract. We did another RFP. We had a bunch of consultants submitting. Concord Engineering ended up being the most advantageous proposal for the city, and we renewed the contract, and then it's coming to expiration at the end of this month. So they drafted a new contract based on our discussion with them, and we're recommending approval of this contract to continue having the services.
Okay, is there any questions for Max? Okay, second?
Second.
All right, we have a first and second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Being no further business before the Board of Public Works, I adjourn.
All right. With that, I will call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee. First on the agenda is the approval of the Finance Committee minutes from December 7th.
Motion to approve.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. All right, we have a couple items up for consideration. First item for consideration is going to be the 2021 collective bargaining agreement between the City of West Bend and the Dispatcher and Clerical Union of Local 503. And Stephanie from HR is here. I'm sorry, Stephanie. Michelle. Michelle is here to talk to us about that. Thank you, Michelle.
Good evening. I just wanted to bring forward the collective bargaining agreement with the dispatchers, clerical, 1.56% we're using CPI for that. And they are different than, say, like our protective because they fall under the regular, we can only bargain wages. So we're bringing that forward for you to review and approve. Do you have any questions? Pretty straight.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks.
Michelle. All right, next on the list is a resolution accepting donations for the smoke alarm program. Chief Kudiak is going to speak with us about that.
Good evening. You have before you a resolution for consideration regarding the two donations that were given to the smoke alarm program. Just an update on that, in case you forgot, that's a free smoke detector program that we do, also carbon monoxide detectors. It started with a grant from West Bend Mutual and State Farm to provide smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors for people that couldn't afford it. We've expanded that program now to almost anybody that requests them. Captain Kenny Aslan, who's here tonight, also heads up that program, and he went and did those two smoke detector installs. Also, you get a fire safety inspection These people appreciated it, and in return donated money back to the program so more people could have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors.
Great, thank you. And thank you to them. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. And then next is the resolution to accept the FEMA grant, and I believe Chief Kudiak is also going to speak on that.
Yeah, if you remember last year, the city accepted the a grant from the AFG, Assistant Firefighters Grant, for the installation of the smoke removal systems in the fire stations. This is the same type of grant, same federal government agency. However, this one, it was COVID specific. We applied for it. Battalion Chief Jeff Gustafson did a great job navigating those waters because, as you know, federal grants are not easy to obtain. This was for additional PPE, some sanitizing equipment, those kind of things that weren't covered under the Road to Recovery Act that we approved earlier in the year, this year for the city. So it's a total grant of $21,147.27, of which the city, it's a 10% match, so the city's responsible for $2,100, and we do have all those items purchased or being purchased, so it will be used up.
Great, I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Chief. Next on the list is the disallowance of a claim for Terry Tugel. I'm not sure if anyone has any discussion. The information should be in your packet. I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of disallowing?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that carries. Now we have the resolution accepting the Wisconsin Department of Justice CEASE grant, and that is going to be Chief Moyler.
Good evening. This actually grant was applied for by Washington County Sheriff's Department. It's a drug enforcement grant targeted some specific enforcement. The share that was given to or forwarded to us was a percentage based upon staff that we have assigned to the countywide drug enforcement unit.
Thank you, Chief.
Motion to approve.
Motion. Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful, thank you, Chief. And last on our items for consideration is going to be the approval of the 2021 budgets for the TID. TID numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And Mark is going to discuss, give us some info on that. Thank you.
Thank you. These are all the budgets for our current active 12 tax and criminal financing districts. Right now, we have, of those 12, we have only 2 of them that have debt on levy. That would be TIDs 11 and 13, totaling just under $250,000 for those 2. The rest of the TIDs are either self-sufficient or have other mechanisms to cover their costs. I won't go through any one of them, but I'll be happy to answer questions on all of them if you'd like. Right now we have only 1 TID that's proposed for borrowing in 2021, and that would be TID number 12. We have a contractual obligation to finish the environmental work in that district, and is also to reconstruct Forest Avenue for adjacent to the hotel and southward to the Trails Edge development that was previously approved. We also have excess increments from donor districts number 4 and 6 that are being used to eliminate debt on levy for both TIDs 5 and 9, and to feed continuing projects for TID number 9, a substantial amount going to the Riverwalk West project. The way we've got these set up right now, we're maximizing existing funds for previously approved projects in TIDs 9, 12, and 14. As I mentioned, 9 is the Riverwalk and also some environmental closure. We had some good news today that we had the final closure approved for that environmental work over by MOA. TID 12, we are contractually obligated, as I mentioned, for Forest Avenue, and Unfortunately, we've had a significant overrun on environmental remediation cost for both in 2020, and we anticipate additional cost in 2021. And in TID 14, we have construction of Forge Place Road, the utilities, the Phase 1 grading, and the stormwater management facilities for that new industrial park. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything on the specifics.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I just had one question, Mark. I know you said 10, 11, and 12 still have some debt on our levy. I just am wondering if you have an idea of when that may...
Actually, 10 is not debt on levy.
Oh, 10 is not, okay.
Only 11 and 13. If I'm not mistaken, let's see here. TID 11 is a distressed TID. That one is anticipated to close out in 2035.
Okay.
And the, I'm sorry, the other one we were talking about? was
13, I think.
TID 13. That one is actually scheduled for a closeout in 2030.
2030, awesome. Thank you. All right. And we had a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion or questions for Mark? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. With no other business before the Finance Committee, I will now end the meeting. Thank you.
And good evening. I will call to order the City of West Bend Common Council meeting for December 21st at 6:30. Note that all aldermen are present and accounted for. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I'll note that we have a lengthy agenda with 31 items, and we're starting with presentations. Number one, the strategic plan presentation by Paul Roback. Just to give us a quick synopsis, we started this process throughout the summer with our in-person meeting. This process continued through the fall and into winter here with many different surveys and different opportunities and ideas that we had bounced off each other. And so Paul's here to present the culmination of those efforts, and we're excited to have him here. Thanks, Paul.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Again, my name is Paul Roback. I work for UW-Madison Division of Extension, Washington County, and I was tasked by the mayor to develop a set of decision-making filters that align with the values of the community, the purpose of government operations, and a desired future that you want to achieve. So when I looked through this objective, there was a number of things that stood out, including purpose and futures. So really looking at both mission and vision before we got to the decision-making filters. As the mayor mentioned, this process did start off in August when we did a couple surveys. One went to all of you as well as the appointed officials and a few citizen representatives. And then another survey went out to the department heads. We held 2 meetings. The first meeting was here in this room, as you recall. And then a second meeting was held with department heads. And each meeting kind of fed into each other, where draft statements were reviewed and continued to be tweaked based on feedback from the participants in the room. Those draft statements were then sent back to all of you for final consideration or final feedback. So I appreciate that the city was comfortable in balancing out both doing in-person and doing the online surveys. With COVID going on, it was a good way to keep everyone engaged and moving along the process without having too many meetings in person in order to accomplish that. So the results of this are that, as you recall, mission really gets to the purpose of an organization, who you are, what you are day to day. So mission is what you are today and your purpose. And the mission that was developed is to support a thriving municipality by providing high quality public safety, infrastructure, and community development for the benefit of residents, businesses, and visitors. A vision looks into the future. So as a result of fulfilling your purpose, your mission every day, what do you hope to achieve? And so the vision is to grow and encourage cultural, economic, and recreational development while enhancing programs and services that will attract and retain diverse residents and businesses to live, work, enjoy all West Bend has to offer. As you recall, these are new statements for the city. Prior to this, the city had mission statements for each of the departments, but not a mission statement for their overall organization operation. Same thing with the vision. There is a community vision statement, which is actually over behind Michelle there, and it's also included in your budget document every year. And so it's a rather lengthy statement that encompasses really the entire community, and there wasn't a vision statement that really got to the core of the city and the city services. So it's important to think through that both of these statements are reflective of city government operations with a tie into the community, as opposed to a community vision, which is really focused external to the operations and looking at the community specific. Through the meetings and online surveys, a lot of data was generated, and from that, 4 key priorities came to the surface: ensuring public safety, driving community and economic development, maintaining and improving infrastructure, and cultivating cultural and recreational amenities. A survey was sent to the Common Council with these 4 strategic priorities, and we asked you to rank them in order, and there was a number of different questions that kind of helped you do that. And as a result of that process, this was the priority ranking that came out. And it's not too surprising. This was almost what we were envisioning after those conversations, because the 2 meetings that we had and the survey data that we had, public safety usually rose to the surface of those conversations. Community and economic development and infrastructure really came up a lot too in those top priorities. We also asked you the funding order for those priorities, and here things changed a little bit. Public safety still was number 1 with the funding order, then maintaining and improving infrastructure became number 2. As you recall in the prior slide, that was number 3. So infrastructure and community economic development switched in the funding order, and then cultivating cultural and recreational amenities came in at the 4th again. Again, not too surprising, maintaining and improving infrastructure does cost a lot of money, as you all are well aware. So you can see how that becomes a higher priority over maybe driving community and economic development. So now that we've done this, it's important to think through, now how do you live this out day to day? How do you make decisions off of this? So not only do we have the priorities, but through the meetings and the survey work, we came up with a lot of ways into which how you will accomplish it. So really this next section on the slide here talks about kind of the day-to-day operations and how you will achieve your vision, as well as going through the strategic priorities. So the first one there, balancing the need for long-term community investments and providing quality services while lowering the overall debt and maintaining reasonable tax base. Second one, attracting and retaining exceptional employees, providing outstanding customer service, implementing continuous process improvement, supporting 21st century municipal operations, and following through on long-term planning. The third, all focus around community assets, maintaining, improving, creating, and promoting them for not only your residents, but also for visitors. The fourth, really relationships, ending divisiveness by working together and fostering open-mindedness and creativity to achieve our full potential. And the last bullet is really about communication. So encouraging two-way communication, increasing transparency to share information to residents and gain an understanding of their needs. So with the communication, it's not just one way, but it's the two-way, communicating out to the community, but also having the community sharing their interest, desire, needs, and priorities back to the city operations. So implementation, right? All strategic plans have an implementation section, and it is really about doing things, right? How are you going to actualize and accomplish what you set out to do and work towards achieving your vision? One way to do that is to really incorporate these ideas into how you operate, both on the administrative side of the operations as well as with the Common Council. So as items come up to the Common Council and you think through those decision-making filters, first of all, you want to make sure that the proposal supports one or more of the 4 strategic priorities. And if yes, how? Second, how does the proposal relate to the means in which the city will accomplish the strategic priorities? That's the how. That's those 5 bullets that you saw on the previous slide. Is it the two-way communication? Is it promoting community assets? Is it lowering the debt level? The third, what are the financial impacts of the proposal? And the last one is, what is administration's recommendation on the proposal? So by having this operationalized into your Common Council agendas and items, you'll be able to, or in the packets that you receive, you'll be able to easily see how the proposals that are coming before you directly align with the 4 key strategic priorities and funding priorities that have been developed as part of this process. So next steps, these are just suggestions. A lot of additional data was generated as part of this, as you could see in the report that was provided to you. There is a lot included in the appendices, especially in Appendix C. So you could, as a next step, have staff go through and identify what is currently being worked on in those goals that were identified in Appendix C. You can identify also which ones aren't being worked on and why that may be. They may not be relevant to the current organization because they were identified back in September. Or they may be things that need to be worked on and prioritized for the future. And lastly, you can review and discuss the values that were identified, which are on page 19 in the Appendix C. A lot of values were brainstormed, but we didn't go through the process to prioritize which values were the most important for the organization. And lastly, there's a lot of suggestions regarding communications. Some of these have already been incorporated, but you can take the outcomes of the communication strategy, the mission, the vision, and start incorporating them into your existing communication strategies like the webpage, stationery, and email signatures. So with that, that concludes my presentation of the process.
We'll open it up if there's any questions, thoughts, anything for Paul.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't specifically have a question for Paul, but is there a plan to now go back to the departmental mission statements and either align them or rethink them to align with the city vision and mission?
I'll let Jay take that one.
I think the answer is yes, this is a framework for moving forward, and you saw in the implementation slide that there are lots of options in different directions that this can be taken and implemented. Certainly one of which is going to be to take new proposals and measure them against the strategic initiatives, revisiting each department's mission. And I guess I'd see that tied with the goals and objectives that were identified and whether they're still relevant for that department or not, and maybe even assigning them to a department. So there's lots of next steps that will come from this, but now that the strategic plan framework is in place, we can get working on that.
Yes, sir. Alderman Dolnick.
Paul, is it, as you pointed out, there was a difference in 2 items on priority versus funding. Is that unusual to happen? Is it a contradiction when that happens, that the priority is different than the funding?
I wouldn't say it's unusual, especially with those 2 funding items right there. So my understanding is that with community and economic development, there's been a lot of momentum in that. You heard you've got the expansion of a new business park. So you can see how that became a top priority, creating and retaining jobs, downtown business improvement districts or TIDs, and then creating new ones. All were kind of top of mind ideas that came out. And so when we went through the priorities, you could see how that can be ranked higher than some of the others. Funding, I think with infrastructure being a bigger expense, you could see how that becomes then a higher funding. So the question that was in the survey was, if you had $100,000, how would you divide that up between these 4 priorities? And so when you have a limited amount of funds, people are prioritizing infrastructure. I'm guessing probably because it costs more than maybe some economic development initiatives. I can also turn it over to others to help theorize on why that is as well. Does my response align with maybe what your thoughts are when all of you are completing the survey?
I think you hit the nail on the head. That that economic development piece. That's what helps us thrive, right? So it's still a top priority, but we understand with our funding that roads cost money, and and nobody's naive to that. So I would agree with that. Any other comments or questions for Paul? Otherwise, my closing question, and maybe Jess can tie in too. Can you talk about the marketing aspect and how we can get this out to the community? Have we went through all this work?
Sure. Well, the document itself can be made public, of course. We can share it on social media and post it onto our website. As far as informing our marketing and communications efforts moving forward, I think this will be greatly helpful in direction and decision making. Does that help?
It's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. If there's nothing else, thank you so much, Paul, for your work over the half a year and working on all this for us. We really appreciate you stepping up to the plate and helping us out. Thank you. All right, and we'll move on with our presentations. We got the West Bend Fire Department update. We have the fire chief here. I think we're all aware that we had some items come up over the summer that kind of brought more attention to the fire department itself and really made us want to more closely examine how that department's been operating, especially under COVID times, and maybe more of a strain on the EMS side. So the fire chief here is to kind of give us a brief presentation on their current operations and what things look like moving forward.
Yes,
Take it away.
Thank you. It's nice to follow a presentation that talks about mission, and priorities being public safety. I think we've been a lot worse.
Welcome. We teed that up just for you.
Exactly. Makes my job easier. So thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to talk tonight about the fire department operations. As you know, the fire department is a key component of the city, and I stand before you tonight representing the fire department and the hardworking men and women in the fire department who are truly, truly a bunch of dedicated individuals who look out for this city and look out for the people that live and work in West Bend. The presentation tonight is mostly data-driven, so if you have any questions about the data, stop me and ask me at that time. Nothing really flows into each other. It's just data-driven that we can talk about and have a discussion about how we operate and the calls and the numbers of responses that we do annually. This is our organizational chart. Tonight we're going to discuss what's in the left-hand corner. You see the red, blue, and green. Those are the shifts. 36 out of our 40 full-time members work a 24-hour shift, staffing the 3 firehouses that are around the city of West Bend. They are staffed with cross-trained firefighters and paramedics, a minimum of 3 at stations 2 and 3, and a minimum of 4 at station 1. So this slide here is the different ways that we break up the calls. You can see in 2018 and 2019, fire calls, 464, right around what was in 2018. 80 to 90% of our calls are EMS related, and those are the next three columns. You'll see the 3,200 medical calls. Those are 911 calls. You'll see the paramedic intercepts. If you remember, those are where we go to outlying fire departments and provide paramedic service to paramedics in a car with paramedic medications to assist the outlying fire departments to provide paramedic service to those people that need it. The next one is interfacility transports. That's where we transport from facility to facility. That would be freighter at West Bend to freighter at Milwaukee, St. Joe's, Milwaukee, Grafton, those kind of hospitals. And then the last one is community paramedic visits. You'll notice in 2019 that program was discontinued. That was a cooperation between Freighter at West Bend and us in order to provide follow-up visits to recently discharged patients in the community. If you recall, the Affordable Care Act had Fines for hospitals, if patients were released from a hospital and then readmitted within 60 days, they were fined. This was a program that was designed to eliminate those. And I'm not sure if the fines ever materialized for hospitals, but there was changes at the hospital level, and therefore the program was discontinued. So if you look in 2018, there was 4,200 calls, 4,252, and in 2019, 4,273. We also contract with Town of Barton and the Town of West Bend to cover certain areas of those townships, and you can see those numbers before you. You can see that since 2006, there's been no staffing increases, so the current 40 full-time firefighters are still the current 40 full-time firefighters, yet the call level has doubled. Another aspect of this that's not on the slide is that as the calls doubled, so has the length of a call. We no longer have a hospital located in the city. We're doing interfacility transports where we're taking people down to Milwaukee. So the time away from the stations has even more than doubled since 2006. Yep.
Is there any one thing you can attribute the climb in calls to? I mean, obviously our population hasn't doubled. Is there anything you can pinpoint as to what's driving the increased call volume?
I think it has a couple things to do with it. I think the aging population. A lot of our calls are for the elderly. We also had some major buildings go up of assisted living facility types that increased the calls exponentially. And so it's not like one house adds X number of ambulance calls, but yet a place like New Perspective or those kind of facilities do create quite a bit of calls.
Do you have the ability to analyze like facilities like that? How many calls do you go to Lighthouse? How many to Cedar Lake? Do you have those numbers? Obviously, Lighthouse is newer, but like Cedar Lake has been here for years and years. Has that volume of calls gone way up?
It has.
It has.
Right. And we do have that ability, and I could get you those numbers for each of the major facilities.
When we're all done, I'll probably come up with a list of questions and we'll chat. And
we look forward to that. Average runs per day, again, since 2006, a little over 5 to now over 11 calls a day. And again, if you take those calls, each one about 2 hours long, that takes up the majority of the day. And as we get busier doing those kind of things, we are just as busy still doing fire inspections and training, vehicle maintenance, equipment maintenance, all those kind of things increase as well. So the days are very, very busy. Question was about COVID impact. If you look at this, and it might be a little hard to see, but the top blue line is the overall 2019's ambulance calls. You can see that in January and February it increased a little bit. COVID hit us hard in March. There was the feeling at that time that it's best not to go to the hospital if you were sick. You were supposed to call your doctor at home. They would prescribe certain things and those kind of things. So we saw a dip in ambulance calls during that period in March and April, but then as it goes up into June and July, then you start to see that increase back again. And then it dipped a little bit, and then we hit that second spike in November, and it just took off. And in November, these gentlemen can attest to it that we saw a lot of sick people with confirmed COVID, taking them to hospitals. So if you look then at the green line that's on there, that is the interfacility transports, and they almost mirror the ambulance calls. So as ambulance calls go up, so do interfacility transports. And a lot of that has to do with the hospital being full, so those patients have to be transferred. It also is the fact that, like we talked about, we transported a lot of sick people that needed to go to other care facilities. The red line is fire calls, and then the purple line is the intercepts. Talked a little bit about how we run. We run out of 3 stations, all cross-trained. Pretty sure everybody knows where Station 1 is downtown, Station 2 out in the east side, and Station 3 Down on the south side, stations 2 and 3 are always staffed with 3 personnel. Station 1, when there is nobody on vacation or nobody on sick leave, has a total of 6 personnel, but no more or no less than 4. The 2 X's indicate now what would happen if two stations went out on ambulance calls. We always try to keep 2 stations intact. In this scenario, if stations 2 and station 3 were on calls, we would call back off-duty firefighters to backfill those stations. If you look at that last section, the problem with the number of runs we're running now and the number of simultaneous calls we're running, we're facing a huge opportunity or challenge of burnout of our firefighters. If you look, out of 365 days in a year, our personnel work 120 of those days. They're normal shifts. In 2019, we asked our personnel to come back 159 times on their off days to come back and staff stations. That means after their 24-hour work days, we asked them to come back, staff a station, because 2 stations were out on calls already. These personnel are not obligated by contract to come back. They simply come back because they are that dedicated and that concerned about the citizens of West Bend. They know that their brother and sister firefighters need them to come back so that those stations are staffed. So when you look at that slide alone, that tells you the amount of dedication our firefighters have, but it also is to show you that we are possibly burning out our firefighters. Yep.
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
When we do call back for the 154 times, is that because we're concerned the reciprocal care with the other municipalities won't happen? Or is that because the reciprocation is not, like they're busy as well, so you're concerned like, oh, we can't just ask Hartford to cover if, say, a call comes in? Do you check on that before you call back in those people, or do they come back in before we look at the reciprocal care? I don't know the word for that.
Sure. The main reason that we call back in is so that we always have 2 station staff, so that in the event we would have a fire call, we would have 2 engines to be able to respond to a fire call. So we'd have an initial crew and a backup crew. So our main goal is always to have 2 fire trucks staffed.
So so you're saying you would call them back in before there's obviously a need, but with that's before checking on like the reciprocal care, I guess. I don't know the word.
Right.
Because we have like reciprocity, right, with like Hartford or
Mutual aid.
Mutual aid, yeah,
Yep.
That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, mutual aid. Would you call them back in before you would address mutual aid, or does the mutual aid? I guess I'm just looking at priority.
Sure. Mutual aid is intended to, when all your resources are exhausted, to call them. So being able to call back our off-duty personnel, at that point our resources aren't exhausted, so we should not be using mutual aid to backfill stations. If we have another call like that, all of our resources are exhausted and we would have mutual aid. In 2020, you can see 206 times we had back-to-back calls, which left only 1 firehouse staffed. So we had to call back in. Three calls or more, 54 times, and 4 more calls, 16 times. So as you look at those numbers over the past 4 years, you can see a huge increase in the number of times 3 and 4 calls are going on at one time now. If you recall, last month, I believe it was, when on social media we had 7 calls within a half hour. We don't staff for 7 calls in a half hour. We don't have equipment for 7 calls in a half hour, and that's where mutual aid would come in. Yes, Mayor.
Chief, just back on your last slide, how do you measure that burnout rate? I mean, I'm assuming you do exit interviews when firefighters leave too. Do they mention that, or what are the other ways that you're measuring that?
We try to talk to them, try to make sure that we have conversations with them to see how they're doing. But it turns to decline the number of times they come back, and then that just leaves the stations emptier.
Chief,
Yep.
how many times have we not been able to get people back on a callback? How many times has the callback system failed?
Sure. In 2020, when I made this presentation in early November, there was 4 instances where we had to turn calls over to other agencies. And in 2019, there was twice that we had to turn calls over. On fire calls, we automatically call in Jackson Fire Department when we have a working fire. And they bring an engine and a chief just to make sure that we have enough personnel on the scene.
Chief, is one of the main problems with mutual aid response time?
Yes, we are the only
You really don't wanna do
24/7 fully staffed fire department. Jackson now has 24/7 coverage. They have one person there 24/7. Hartford does, but we don't, they're a little farther away, so we don't have mutual aid agreements with them. Our main mutual aid agreement is with Jackson, Kewaskum, Allenton, and Newburgh, because they're the four that touch us. This slide here depicts the per capita. The last year that this was published was in 2018. West Bend is the third one that's in there. The first one is Beaver Dam. Population of about 16,000. In parentheses, you'll see the 1.3, 1.2. That's firefighter per 1,000 capita. So if you look at this slide here, the two right next to West Bend, one is Stevens Point, a little less than we are. Manitowoc, a little more population than we are. We are by far the cheapest per capita fire department in that survey. Another challenge that we face is revenue collection. The graph on the left shows the bottom, the big color is the 911 calls in revenue, then the interfacility, and then the orange up on top is the paramedic intercepts. So if you look at just 2019 on the graph on the right, in revenues, the 911 revenue was $987,000, the interfacility was $255,000, and the intercepts were $32,400. As you can see, revenue is going down, but calls are going up. A lot of that is due to mandatory write-offs for Medicare. It's also people defaulting on their ambulance bills, and insurance is not paying what they normally paid. So the challenge with that revenue, if you take a look at this graph here, is that the tall bar is what we bill, the middle yellow is what we collect, and the next one is what we write off. There is some good news to the write-offs. The Medicare has changed in 2021. They've increased their rates, not substantially, but any increase is good. So we will be able to collect more revenue for those. If you look at the second column is the interfacility transports. Again, what we invoice is on the left, what we collect is in the middle, and what we write off is on the right. And then the last one is the intercepts, which we bill the actual fire department, so there is no deduction or there is no write-off in that category. And then you can see on the graph on the right is the actual numbers. In 2019, there was 252 or 2,552 911 calls. The average bill was 800 plus. We collected not quite 400. So we were averaging about 46.83% of what we invoiced.
Chief, in cases where we're ending up writing off, do we attach the tax bill of the resident in those situations? In other words, do we at least make an attempt to collect down the road when a property sells or whatever?
The bulk of it is Medicare, which we can't do anything about. A smaller percentage is what people either default on. That automatically goes into the state collection agency, which puts that on their taxes. So we collect it there. Or they call us, they set up a payment plan. There is a few instances where a hardship case that I have the authority to bring to you to write off, and every once in a while you'll see one of those come through. It's usually an elderly couple where maybe one of the spouses dies, or they're at the Samaritan, or things like that where they don't have the funds to pay it. We'll write those off. But those are definitely rare. Most of them go into the collection, or they set up a payment plan with the finance department.
Chief, could you go back a couple of slides?
Sure.
You said something about we are the cheapest fire department in the area. Can you go into a little more detail on that?
That's just the budget per capita. So in this case
You mean
here.
we're spending the least per
Correct,
capita?
spending the
Okay.
least on the fire department.
Okay.
The first one is Beaver Dam. They just passed a referendum to add 6 firefighters. And so that rate, I think, is up there is at 1.2 firefighters per capita, and they're going to 1.5 now with that.
Chief, can I just ask on that? Is that pretty common that municipality would go to a referendum for a staffing thing like that?
Now it is because of the fact of expenditure restraints. The Beaver Dams was 420 plus thousand to add those firefighters.
Okay.
You know how many they added?
6.
6, and it was 400,000?
Correct.
A year?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was about 70-some thousand per firefighter, and then they offset some of the cost with reduction in overtime.
I don't suppose you could, off the top of your head, do the math to figure out where that would put us. That's a 1 point whatever.
It would, if we added 6 firefighters, it would put us at 1.5 as well.
It would? Okay.
In 2020 and 2019, in the initial fire department budget, there was information regarding adding firefighters. In 2020, 3 firefighters roughly was $215,000 plus the personnel insurance costs. So we were figuring about $72,000 per firefighter. And again, some of that could have been offset with overtime.
If we were to add firefighters, what would that do to your schedule? In other words, would you add another shift or add one person to each station? How does that, how would you deal with that, assuming you got well, you said, how many did you ask to add?
12.
12?
If we add 6, we would add 2 to every shift. Or if we would add 3, we'd add 1 to every shift. And then that would help with the overtime. It would help backfill the stations because there'd be that extra person back.
And it would help with burnout.
And it'd help with burnout.
Yeah.
With that question, actually, Chief, would
Yep.
we be able to get from you maybe like a graph over the last, I don't know, 5-10 years of like how many firefighters were hired that year, fired that year, quit, and how many retired? So like those 4 things, kind of saying two firefighters were hired, 3 people were fired, 4 quit, and 1 retired. Just to kind of see, I mean, I know you're saying there's a burnout rate and things like that. I'm just kind of trying to quantify how bad we're looking at, that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Chief, as I recall, every municipality is at an ISO rating.
Correct.
Is that only determined by the number of stations and the radius of each station? Does that have any relationship to the number of personnel?
Yes. It has the total response force is taken into consideration, how many firefighters we can get on a scene in less than a certain amount of time.
Now, how has our rating been in light of this? You're telling us that there hasn't been an increase in staffing in 20 years.
Since we did the automatic aid with Jackson, it's kept us at a 2, ISO rating of a 2 in the city.
Oh, because of that relationship?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So they actually act like they're added to our department.
Okay.
Does Jackson benefit in the same way?
Yes. And we do a lot of mutual aid because we're the big brother kind of thing. We're the, full-time department. And so we do a lot of ambulance calls that we cover for other fire departments that, like everybody else in the county, is struggling with numbers, volunteers during the day especially. So we do quite a bit of mutual aid.
Chief, when was the last time, obviously, budget process goes through a whole bunch of steps before we see it. When was the last time you actually put in for an increase in staff?
In 2019, it was in the budget I submitted. In 2020, it was in the budget memo I submitted with the budget. It was not in there, but it explained the need for it with the amount. And in 21, it was not in there.
I just have one other question, but I know you're saying we cover Jackson or help Jackson. Do we receive funds from Jackson for doing that? Like I know Town of West Bend pays you guys, $250,000 a year to service them. Does Jackson also pay to service them? Or are there other communities, is that just through the mutual aid?
That's through mutual aid because Jackson has a fire department, so they cover it themselves, whereas the Town of West Bend areas that we cover in the Town of Barton do not have fire departments, so we are the only responsible party for that. Talked about that one. The interfacility run review, questions always come about interfacilities. If you look here, the program was started in 2007. It's increased dramatically over that time. The reason it has increased dramatically over that time is because these guys are good at what they do. We do not solicit interfacility runs. We do not advertise for interfacility runs. It is the hospitals deciding what's best for their patient, and more often than not, they're selecting us. And you can see the, on the bottom of that is also one of the things, one of the downfalls with interfacility transports is the return trips. And this is probably an area we need to look at sooner than later, about doing return trips. If you look at, over the years, it's ranged anywhere from 57 to 80 to down to 64, 2019, 98, 2020, 57. That's where we take a patient from freighter back to a facility such as New Perspective or any of those assisted living facilities. The reason we do that is because we're the ones that took them there, and usually they've exhausted every other option to get them home. So we will go back up there, and if it's medically necessary, we'll take them back to their resident. Some of the things we're finding out lately with COVID is that these patients can't take public transportation. They physically have no other ride to get back. So we feel the obligation to take them home. Again, it's not an emergency response. So that's probably why the collection rate is down on those.
What would they do, Chief, if you guys didn't take them home?
Not sure. We just had one the other day. Person with dementia, wife has dementia. We took him up. He's COVID positive. They treated him. Needed to go home. Couldn't take public transportation. Private ambulance wouldn't take him. So we went and took him home.
It's just the right thing to do.
That's what I thought.
Can I ask about the both as far as what's like the time, like how much time does it take to prepare for these sort of interfacility runs and the return trips, and how many are normally staffed to do that?
The most of them that we do are what is called emergency interfacility transports. Now our version of emergency might be a little different than what the hospital thinks is an emergency, because for us an emergency is we're out the door now. But a majority of them are what we call emergency interfacility transports, or at least ones that need to go now because they're having some type of medical event that they need higher care.
So how much time does that normally take for you to prep and go and return, and how many bodies of your guys are you using?
3 personnel, and it's all of 2 hours.
Okay.
You know how many times we've been on one of these that has required us to make a call back?
We don't have that great of software to tell us that we can do the simultaneous calls, but we have a hard time tracking interfacilities and the type of call that's created the.
If we got out of the interfacility transfer business, who does it?
Who does them?
Yeah, who does it then?
There's a private ambulance here in town, Lifestar, and there's also, it was owned by Flight for Life, and now it's another company out of Richfield.
Do the private companies that provide transport, do they have paramedic services, or is it only for people that are in relatively stable condition?
They do transport with paramedics. So where we go from here, and again, this is a little small up on the slide, but we believe that we need to evaluate all department operations. We have to look at what we must do, what we should do, what we would like to do, and what we no longer can do. And I think as the staff gets stretched thinner and thinner, unfortunately, the list of what we can no longer do will probably grow. We'll review our staffing and callback procedures. Again, monitoring burnout and things like that. We'll review the interfacility program. What types do we do? What facilities do we go to? What rates do we charge? Return trip policies, those kind of things. They all have to be reevaluated. We'll also research a SAFER grant option, come with you with more information with that next year. The SAFER grant is similar to that AFG grant that we passed tonight. They provide funding for firefighters for up to 3 years. So you can add firefighters or keep firefighters, and this grant will pay for their salaries and things like that. However, the caveat is at the end of those 3 years, you must put them on your payroll. 2021, I would recommend that we do some type of independent consulting firm that looks at our staffing, at our stations, and our overall operational plan. I think that's a key point, is to get an outside investigation to look at our operation, to tell us probably what we already know, but to confirm what we already know. I think we need to have the support of whatever those findings are, and in 2022, implement those recommendations, or at least a plan to implement those recommendations.
So you bring that forward here in 2021, bring us some sort of proposal to move forward with the consulting, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have money in the budget for that?
I did not budget any in 21 or 21, but I'm going to try to see what we have left over in 2020 budget in one of those, either the overtime budget or a salaries budget. One of the things that we haven't used a lot of is seminars accounts, because everything has been canceled. So we'll also look at seminars account to see if there's funding available.
I'm just wondering how the independent consulting firm is going to be chosen, and who's going to choose the firm we go with.
We'll just put that out for bids and look at what their track records are and what people say about them.
Okay.
There's a lot of them out there. Some local and some not local.
Any other questions for the chief?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for presenting. Thank you all you guys for attending as well. I'm really looking forward to the independent consulting firm, that proposal coming forward and digging deeper into that. I know Administrator Shambo is on top of that as well, so we'll get an update fairly soon.
See you in January.
See you then. Thank you. All right, so I'll move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes, the Common Council regular meeting minutes for December 7th, 2020 at 6:30.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, I'll give that one to Model and Alan. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, before
sir.
you get into the consent agenda, I would like to ask that item 11 be retitled as selection of council president. It's not an appointed position. And the second, I'd like to see item 21 tabled for action during the next meeting. It was added to the agenda well after the deadline for items. It's certainly not an emergency.
I think I'll defer to our legal counsel on both those.
So, I mean, the motion to table can be taken up when the agenda item is called. There's no need to take it up now.
Okay.
The appointment of council president is, I think it is a selection. There's no specific language one way or the other saying that it's appointed. I think it's a selection, so.
So it say selection. That's fine. Can you though answer Alderman Allen's question about that timing of 21? I mean, it was put in within our.
Yep, it complied
timeline
with all statutes as far as adding things to the agenda. it may have been outside of the normal, deadline for regular submittals for council agenda items, but it complied with all statutory guidelines.
Okay. But it's still outside the normal council guidelines.
Well,
I've asked
so
for-
were several other items that were added. So, I mean, it's not unusual to add things after the usual deadline for submitting things. It's just everybody likes to have them in by noon on Wednesdays so they can be published during the normal course and not later in the
Yeah,
process.
but we're talking, end of the day on Friday time frame.
Yeah, it was still published in a timely manner. It was still 24-hour notice.
All right, did we get a vote, Steph, on 3 yet? Did we vote on that one? I know we got a motion second, but did we vote? Yes. We did, okay. So then I'll be looking for a consent agenda of 4
Motion to
through 10.
approve on the consent agenda.
And I'll add that number 11 is changed to selection of council president. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'd like to do a point of order, and that is a reminder of the council, let the mayor finish. In your haste to make these motions, have the courtesy to let the mayor finish in his calling of the item before you interrupt him. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Allen, second by Muddle. Any other discussion or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So I'll move on to item number 11, which is selection of council president. Alderman Hoogister was the past council president. It typically has gone to the most senior member of our council, which in this case would be Alderman Butchlick. I did have a couple conversations with him in an effort, considering he does do a great job with Public Works, and he's also going to be stepping up to the plate on the Plan Commission. I would recommend we not overburden him as much, which means that the next most senior person would be Alderman Model. So that would be my recommendation, but it is up to the council to decide whoever they would like.
Motion to select Justice Model as the council president.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. I guess I can open up if there's any other nominations. Yes, sir, Alderman Dolnick.
First of all, Mayor, I think it's really not appropriate for you to be making recommendations. This is purely an act of the council. I don't remember a mayor doing this in the past. That said, I would move, I think if Alderman Butchlick feels he can take this on, it's for him to say he can't. He's indicated he's willing to take this on, so I'm nominating him based on his seniority, which has been our criteria in the past. It's not a reflection on you, Justice, but this has been the criteria that we follow.
Standard practice, sure.
I would second that.
Yeah. And if I could just clarify, I believe I did make a recommendation back in April at that same time as well. Sounds good. Can I ask staff, how should we do this if we have 2 nominations? Should we take one after another, or do a voice vote on both?
Can I just make it as a point of discussion? I do think we have a lot of great options on this council. We have an abundance of great people to choose from. So I do want to point that out as we have a lot of great people. So it's not necessarily reflective of like this person won't do a good job. I also nod to John. He was somebody that I reached out to when I heard council president was going to be needing to be filled, as somebody that I would look to for advice, knowing his seniority and his time spent on council. So it's again not a reflection of justice or anything like that, but just as a nod to John.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that, Megan. And my understanding when I was talked to about this was that John was not interested in the position, so, or that you had talked to him or going to, and that was my impression. Maybe that wasn't necessarily said, but that was my impression. So,
Just to clarify, just so you know, Justice, the mayor just asked me if I would be interested in the Plan Commission. I said I would, and he did not ask me if I was interested in the council because he said I was chairman of the Board of Public Works, and he felt that would be putting more onto me, but I never was asked if I would accept it. And I will accept it, the nomination, because of the fact that the council, my colleagues do have faith in me, and if I would say no, I feel that that would be a slap in their face with having the support that I have from them. So I am going to say that I did not decline it, but I will accept the nomination. I basically will let it up to the council.
And I have every faith in you too, John. Absolutely. Sounds good. Then I'll call for a vote. I'll just go one by one. All those in favor of Alderman Model as council president, signal by saying aye. All those in favor of Alderman Butchlick, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
There we go. Congratulations. Just another thing added to your plate. I was trying to help you, John. I was trying. All right,
thank you
congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll move on to item number 12, discussion decision to fill automatic District 6 vacancy. We'll start off with Ian on that, if you can, just to talk about the procedures that we've done in the past.
So there's a few different options for filling a vacant alderperson or vacant District 6 vacancy. The first would be appointment by the Common Council. That's a process we've followed multiple times in the past. We publish and have people apply and then do interviews, make an appointment, and vote on that. The other option in certain circumstances would be a special election. Practically speaking at this point, because the District 6 is up for election this spring, a special election would essentially run with that election and wouldn't get somebody in sooner than the actual election would. The other option is to do what we did with mayor, which is just not act on it and leave it vacant until the April election, after which somebody would be voted in and be sworn in at the organizational meeting in April.
I would like to motion to leave that position vacant. I know we have two candidates or at least one candidate who has submitted paperwork. It seems very normal that we could have that election just run as is. As Ian said, if we did a special election, it would run in tandem. So I would motion that we go with option 3 and leave that vacant until District 6 constituents have the chance to vote and decide who they would like to represent them.
I'll second that.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to that and add a statement to the public that people that are constituents in District 6 can contact any alderman, and the alderman will meet will fulfill their needs for representation. I personally am willing to step up and help out if anybody in District 6 has a problem. But I'd like to see everyone on the council take the same position, or at least let people know who they can get to.
Absolutely.
Great. I welcome that amendment. Great.
So, it's already been seconded. It needs a seconded amendment.
Second.
All right. So we got Kennedy and Model. And if I can just ask, so if the January 5th deadline comes around and we only have one candidate who would complete all the paperwork, signatures, and everything, is it unusual, or is there a statute of limitations to appoint that person then, knowing that they're going to be alderman come April anyway?
You guys can choose to revise the process at any point in time. Okay. Like, this isn't like a one-time shot.
Yeah.
If you guys come back after that and say, hey, there's only one applicant and we'd like to appoint that person, that's perfectly within your rights. If there's two and you say, nope, we're going to leave it stand, that's fine too.
Okay.
As I understand it, even if only one person applies and meets the filing criteria, that doesn't preclude someone making a write-in campaign. So, I mean, until the actual election occurs, it's not a done deal, and we shouldn't necessarily take that as a reason to make an appointment. It's either something we want to go ahead and do now, or it's we wait for the process.
Don't they have to file paperwork in order to do a writing campaign anyway?
Yeah.
You do. You actually have to, getting that done, you can miss the filing deadline. That means you won't be on the ballot. But if it's a write-in campaign and they're a registered write-in candidate who has met the criteria to be a write-in candidate, then you can basically complete that like 2 weeks before the election or a week before the election. So the registered write-in process is, it's actually harder than becoming a candidate. So if you want to become a candidate, don't do it that way. The number of signatures you have to get is higher. The threshold for that is higher. But once you are a registered write-in candidate, you're just like any other candidate. You're just not on the ballot by name.
Any other questions on this? Otherwise, we do have a motion and a second to leave it vacant and let the election be. So all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, sorry.
Will the public relations people be putting out some kind of a statement to the constituents? Or?
So they actually did 2 weeks ago that went out, but we can always reiterate it. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, move on to item number 13, a resolution honoring Fire Lieutenant Andrew Whitmore. If I can have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Alan. And
Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that it be read.
Yep, I was planning on reading it.
Lieutenant Whitmore is with us tonight.
Wonderful, even better. All right, we have a motion by Alan, second by Model. All those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
This resolution reads, whereas firefighters protect our lives, our families, and the economic life of our community from the threat of fire and hazards. They risk their lives to preserve the lives of others and protect our property and resources from destruction. And whereas Andrew Whitmore completed his education in 1998 and began his service with the West Bend Fire Department in December 1995 as a firefighter. In January 1999, he became an MPO, was promoted to a lieutenant in January 2001, and is a member of the International Association of Firefighters. Whereas Andrew Whitmore is known to be dedicated to the service of providing high-quality EMS care and continued leadership on the fire ground, is always willing to step forward with opinions to better the department, puts himself in a leadership role, and takes interest in the history of firefighting. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of West Bend honors Fire Lieutenant Andrew Whitmore and expresses its deep appreciation for his 25 years of loyal, dedicated service. This was passed and approved today. If those in the council chambers could please rise and give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much. I just want it to be known that I didn't come here for this. I came here to listen to the chief's presentation.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll move on to item number 14, a resolution honoring Steve Hoogester. If I could have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Alan and Dolnick. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And I'll also read this resolution. It reads, whereas Steve E. Hoogester was an employee of the West Bend Police Department for 34 years, retiring as a lieutenant in 2011. After retirement, Steve was elected to the West Bend Common Council in 2013 as District 6 Alderman and was later appointed the position of acting mayor in 2019. And whereas during his tenure, Steve was Common Council President. He also served as a representative on the Traffic Safety Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, Plan Commission, Deer Management Committee, and Finance Committee. And whereas Steve was dedicated to his role serving his neighbors, took pride in his efforts to grow and give back to the community, was an outstanding leader who earned respect and displayed strength during his term, and will leave a lasting impact on the city of West Bend. Now therefore be resolved that the Common Council of the City of West Bend, Washington County, Wisconsin, honors Steve E. Hoodister and expresses its deep appreciation for his dedication to the City of West Bend. And be it also resolved that the Common Council extends its sincere condolences and sympathies to Steve's wife, Cindy, their sons, Scott and Tom, and extended family. And this was passed and approved today. So thank you, everybody, for allowing me to read that into the record as well. And we'll move on to item number 15, which is the mayoral appointment of Alderman Butchlick to the Plan Commission.
Second.
Thank you. Is that Kaler? Yeah. And Alan? All those in favor of that appointment, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next three are reappointments to the bid board, starting with number 16, mayoral appointment of Mike Hussar to the bid board.
Second.
Thank you. Kaler and Alan. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Number 17, mayoral appointment of Tony Jason to the bid board.
Second.
Kaler and Alan. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And number 18, mayoral appointment of Tony Cable to the bid board.
Second.
Thank you, Kaler and Alden and Alan. One more time. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we'll move on to item number 19, mayoral appointment of Craig Walker to the Parks and Rec Commission. If I could have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
Question.
Sorry, yep.
This is to replace Alderman, the late Alderman Hugister on the Parks and Rec because the special exception was made so that Megan could stay on.
Yep.
So this gets it back to the one alderman on the commission.
Yeah, there was no mandate that two aldermen needed to be there, so it was just a vacancy.
Actually, the structure was one alderman. There was, as I understand, a special exception.
Yep. So you're correct. It would bring it back to how it was before.
All right. Thank you.
So that was Model who had the second. Kennedy? Sure. Sounds good. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Thank you, and thank you for Mr. Walker for stepping up. Item number 20, mayoral appointment of Alderman Kaler to the Traffic and Safety Commission.
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you, Butchlick and Model. All those in favor of that appointment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 21 is mayoral appointment of Joshua McCutcheon to the Library Board. I'll look for motion first.
Motion to table until next meeting.
And I'll look at that failing for lack of a second. I know I tried to email the whole council so that there wasn't any confusion.
Well, then can you explain why I didn't get anything on this until Friday night late? This whole thing happened like late Friday at best, and so I get an email from the city administrator Sunday night. I believe it was 10 o'clock Sunday night or something like that. And you know, but I heard about it before that because I was asked about it before that.
So the resignation happened on Friday. The library board president, Deb Bardakowski, she did really push to have an appointment ASAP just because they are hiring a new library director and she wanted to make sure she had a full board ready to go. The concern was brought up that Joshua McCutcheon was a candidate for a District 6 alderman. He assured me he is not and does not want to be, and instead one that was looking for an opportunity to serve on a committee, board, and commission. And this is just a good plug that any residents who would like to serve on any committee or commission, please contact my office. There's a form on my website. We can fill that out, and Josh had brought that up back in April when I first got elected as well. Just a second, we got a motion here. So we got a motion by Kaler. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And Dolnick?
I was going to second the motion to table.
Oh, sorry.
But,
Yep.
No,
but once I second, if we're following Robert's rules, then there's no further discussion. So before I second it, is that correct?
You had,
Oh, I thought a motion to table cut off discussion. All right, so I'll second the motion to table, then I'll have something to say. And that was simply, I don't know Mr. McCutcheon. I'm sure he's a fine person. This is nothing to do with him personally, but just the chain of events and the timing with his candidacy, which, has the candidacy been withdrawn, Stephanie?
Joshua called me today and he did withdraw his declaration of candidacy today. That's correct.
He did?
Verbally.
Yep.
All right.
but he hasn't filed the amended.
Nomination papers were not filed. He is not on the ballot.
Okay.
All right, well, in that case, I'm sorry, Mark, I'll withdraw my motion to table then. I think then that is settled.
There was a motion
Approved by Kaler and second by Model, right?
Yeah.
right, there was a motion to table, but that failed for lack of a second because you had discussion after that. Then we had the motion to approve by Randy Kaler and seconded by Jed Dolnick. Is that what you want as a second or something?
That was Model.
Second by Model.
Yep.
Yeah, and Mark, I don't disagree with you that it seems like it's moving fast, but I just can't see a reason to not go forward with it, considering he's not in the running for
Yeah, I just question the fact that, the first I'm hearing about it officially is, after I went to bed last night.
Yeah, I understand.
So,
I think it's absolutely, in my sense, it's absolutely appropriate if he's not going to be on the ballot. If he is verbally withdrawn, I take him at his word that he's not going to be seeking election on District 6. So it's a citizen appointment. And to me, as somebody that stepped forward as a citizen appointment originally on Parks and Rec Commission, it's an unpaid position. It is community service at its finest. I welcome him to join us as a citizen member on the library board if he's not seeking election. I don't want to obviously give anybody a leg up in an election time frame, but if he has said he's not doing that, I don't think that that's the issue here. So I see no problem with Mr. McCutcheon joining the library board as a citizen appointment if he's not running.
Sounds good. And we do have a motion second, so I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of appointment of Mr. McCutcheon to the library board, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And I know he's not here tonight, but congratulations to Josh and thank you for stepping up. Item number 22, recommendation for the USDA Wildlife Service to conduct an abatement program for the survey and removal of deer. And is Alderman Butchlick, were you going to take this one? Or Mike? Yep, go ahead.
We have Mike here. Mike, go ahead. He's worked on this grant so hard, so I'm going to let him take it to the mic. Go ahead, Mike.
I was under the impression you were going to address this. So I have nothing prepared, so, no, before you tonight is, we're requesting approval for the, basically the deer abatement program with the USDA Wildlife Service and starting with the surveying program, which I actually did have that amount with me. So what was included in your packet were their cost estimates for the full survey again this year, just north of $1,000 for that. We were going to survey the same properties we did in last year, and we were going to add Regner Park and the surrounding areas to that also. Part of the survey program is if we need to control a pest, in this situation the pest is a deer, we need to understand what population levels are at, things of that nature. This is not unusual. We've done it with gypsy moth caterpillars to emerald ash borer, et cetera, et cetera. You look at integrated pest management practices. You do surveys, you figure out what your inventories are, what your pest is, and then you look at the economic impact and as to what direction you'd want to go. Also with these surveys, the DNR really likes these surveys because ultimately if we do the abatement program, we get the nuisance permits from the DNR. And the DNR likes to share this information with neighboring properties and things like that. If someone has a question where you're shooting or taking too many deer out of a certain property in the city, we have scientifically based information as to current population levels. The gun deer season's over, we can do population levels. We have the DNR's information on where our deer number should be. So just part of that discussion with the DNR, receiving the nuisance tags is important. We can communicate it to our neighbors, and if anyone has any questions as to, do we really need to do this? These are the numbers, these are the DNR's recommendations. USDA's would do the survey, et cetera. So between running a professional program, an abatement program, working with the DNR, the USDA, trying to be a good neighbor, that's what we're looking for the survey, approval for the surveys.
How many years have we done surveys now for this?
This is the second aerial survey.
This would be the second aerial survey?
This would be the second one. Prior to this, the surveys, they were using helicopters before the UAVs kind of came into the program. 3 years ago, we did surveys on ground, on foot. Without helicopters, that's our next best option. So using the UAVs, infrared camera, we do it at night, all that. So hopefully we can start gathering some historic data also.
That's kind of what I'm wondering if we're really getting there, and what do we have like a goal in mind?
We do have our standards, not our standards. We look at the DNR standards, looking at the farmland regions around the West Bend area, things like that. We are also looking at the car versus deer numbers throughout the city. Where this is happening, the police department, when they track something like that, we know exactly where it's at. We can see it on a map, which might influence, future abatement on certain properties and things like that. So exactly where our numbers were last year, Justice, I don't have that with me, but I can tell you on some of these properties, the numbers should be here, and they were just unbelievable. Even the comments from the USDA, just some of the quantities that we have on some of these properties. So, and we're hoping, one of the goals, and John, I don't want to speak for the entire committee, is we can control the herd, reduce the herd, and maybe use other options in the future, to keep the population to a manageable level.
Sure. I know there's a percentage of constituents in the town that are not in support of the abatement program,
Right.
so
Yep.
I just think they deserve a word.
And we understand that, and that's where the surveys come in, where we can communicate it to them, where these are the numbers.
Sure.
This is where they're at, this is where they should be, so.
Great.
And again, the committee kind of sets our standards, but ultimately we're looking at the DNR to, they're the wildlife biologists that set these density numbers, so.
Right. Thanks, Mike.
What would the target population be for West Bend?
Number of deer in the entire city, I wouldn't even know if the DNR could give us a number like that. What they would look at is deer per acre, or deer per square mile is what they would look at. And what that number is, Mark, I apologize, I wouldn't have that number in front of me.
Any other questions for anybody?
Justice, you had a question on as far as the numbers of the survey from last year?
I was looking for 2 years in a row to.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, this,
ahead,
this
yeah.
2019, 2020, we had 151 deer that were observed in 6 different parks. Ridge Run had a total of 71 deer, just in that park alone.
That's
Lac
right.
Lorraine had a total of 28, and the previous year, we took 23 out of there for removal. So it's not dropping down very much. We have to continue to stay on top of it, otherwise we're going right back to square one again.
Sure.
But I've had comments from people, they have definitely noticed that the abatement program has been successful. They have noticed less problems, but there are areas up in the north end, up by me especially, they're roaming the countryside up there. So we just need to stay on top of it, and I'm glad to hear that Regner Park is included this year, because
18th Avenue
obviously-
being the countryside.
Yeah. Obviously, Regner Park down there, they're spending $13,000 to put a fence up because the deer are destroying their beautiful garden.
Right.
So we have to continue to stay right on top of it.
For sure.
And Mark, I think I have a possible answer here for you. Looking at the USDA last year at the end of the program, they always do kind of a recap on the entire program, what happened, deer survey numbers, etc. They look at their deer densities. When deer densities exceed 20 deer per square mile, now we're going to have damage. We're going to have damage to private property. Could be forest crop damage, things of that nature. So 20 deer per square mile, above that is when we start having problems. The Ridge Run count last year, they were looking at that as 0.65 square miles. Okay, so a little over half a mile. Half a square mile. They had 92 deer within that. So we're talking above 20, we're already having damage. The Lac Loran population, that area, looking at Lac Loran, the county property along Schmidt Road, et cetera, that was 0.35 square miles, and we had 59 deer in that block. So this is where they should be. This is where our populations are. And again, are we managing our forests for future harvest and things like that? Our urban forests are certainly different than what might be in northern Wisconsin or central Wisconsin. That's why it's called an economic threshold. And I would say several years ago, John, that's when West Bend kind of hit that threshold. The number of phone calls from residents and concerns and comments, and the impact on deer versus cars. And the thing is also in West Bend, in general, speed limits at 25, 30 miles an hour. They're not doing 60 down the highway. So many times these deer, the car deer numbers can even be a little lower than what they could be if we were in a township setting or something like that. So the deer numbers are certainly up. These surveys certainly tell us where they're at and what we should do. So,
Mayor, if I can jump in, I found the email from Eric from the DNR last year. Mike's numbers are accurate, but he does list the deer per square mile. 323 deer per square mile at Ridge Run, and 122 deer per square mile at Lac Loran. And then he restates that he's recommending 20 or fewer deer per square mile. So we're way above that number based on the survey that was done last year, and we anticipate the survey to come back similar again.
And Mike, I do want to point out the meat is donated to a local food pantry and processed by them for free, which is a great asset to the community as well. So the deer meat is not going to waste.
Correct. I can tell you when we went to the food pantry this spring with COVID going on, there was a lot of happy people. All the meat is ground. It's ground meat. Pork is added to it, etc. So for the people that are utilizing that, they can use it in many different fashions. So yes, good point. Thank you.
So are you looking for an official motion tonight, or?
Yes, continue with the program and the survey, correct, John?
Yep, motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Miles, second by Allen. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks
you.
so much. Move on to item number 23, a resolution approving purchase of land, and this is for the Riverwalk. Ian, Jay, when are you guys going to take that up?
So this is bringing back before you purchase agreement we had discussed previously for the parking lot behind the BMO Harris Bank along the Riverwalk. This has kind of been revived with further discussions with the owner. If you recall, it kind of went away because there was a change in the dedication of the parking to the city and the need for them to retain the parking. We've worked around that a bit by including language in an easement or the parking agreement that says that unless and until they require it and they sign it as exclusive parking for them, it's going to remain public parking. So theoretically, and there is a debate as to whether there would ever actually be a true need for all of that parking. Because of just the need for that many employees in that building at this point. But the hope is that, this helps us meet their requirements to get lender approval for the sale and also gets us the public parking we need. It would still remain public parking outside of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So weekends, evenings, when the parking needs are much greater, it would remain public parking. We also do have reserved two handicap parking spots and one public parking stall, even if they mark the rest of the lot as exclusive use. So we still get our handicap parking that's accessible to the future Riverwalk as well in that area. So this is just re-ratifying that offer to purchase so we can move forward with the purchase of that land. We also have managed to extend our grant agreements to re-extend those out to accomplish this within the grant program we were previously operating under.
Motion to approve.
I think we got a motion from Kaler. Do we have a second?
Second.
There you go. Any questions for Ian? If not, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we'll move to item 24, resolution authorizing the sale and the appropriation of funds of Mutual Mall.
So you had previously approved the sale of Mutual Mall, obviously, since its demolition has started. This is just documenting the appropriation of the funds to the correct accounts for Carrie's record-keeping purposes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Sounds good. Model and Allen. Any questions on that? Do you have something?
I just clarify where they're going. So the funds are not designated for a project. They're going into the capital improvement project area undesignated. So they'll be available to be assigned to a future project.
Sounds good. We have a motion and a second, and all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And item 25, a resolution approving sale of vacant land on Forest Avenue. This is for Trails Edge follow-up, and Ian.
Yep. So we have all the closing documents. This is kind of moved up due to some tax concerns from the purchasers. This is the resolution required to finish off that sale. I do have the signed development agreement that was approved last meeting. So if you approve this, we will anticipate closing on the sale of that land by the end of the year.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Alan. I'll give that one to Dolnick. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And 26, disallowance of claim for Terry Tugel. We're just looking for the disapproval.
Motion to disapprove.
Second.
Thank you, Alan and Model. If there's no discussion, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And 27, proposal for orange bike loop for bike-friendly West Bend. Who's taking this one? Jake?
I can introduce it. This came before a previous council requested by Bike Friendly to authorize and have constructed the bike lanes. And what by bike lanes we mean in this area is a designated bike area, the Orange Loop. The Orange Loop is connectivity throughout the city of the trail and connecting to our parks and some schools. Bike Friendly worked really hard with our engineering department. Max and Emily worked on this again back in 2017 to come to agreement with Bike Friendly on the best route and the minimal impact to our street and costs. The cost that you see in the packet for the Orange Loop itself is $5,000 for materials, which is paint in this case, the sharrows, which is the outline to put the paint down, and then the signage, the poles and the signs. And those numbers were estimated by our Public Works Department in conjunction with engineering, Max. And the staff costs that you see are the estimated cost of the time that it would take our employees to put the signs up and to actually paint the arrows onto the pavement in the areas where they're needed. Again, Max and his team have gone through the MUTDCD or whatever that right acronym is, the traffic manual, to have the right amount of signage and painted sharrows down. The cost is not a hard cost. It's not an additional cost to our city budget, but rather a cost that would be the staff for the Public Works and potentially Parks, other people that might be partnering to get them down, just redirecting their duties from filling a pothole or crack filling or some other regular sidewalk work that they would be doing on a daily basis to get this level of work done. So the donation would come from Bike Friendly for the $5,000 of the materials, and then the labor would come from our city staff to get this completed. And after a conversation with Doug, we would make the commitment, if this is approved tonight, to get it installed by June of 2021. And you can see on your screen, you have some Bike Friendly representatives, Jeff Pitts and Dave Hanrahan on WebEx, who can speak to this in some more detail as well as Doug and Max, who are here tonight.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Model, second by Allen. I'll open up to any questions. Alderman Dolnick.
Could someone explain what the purpose is of marking these loops? Because when I ride a bike, I just ride until I get to the Eisenbahn. What are the purposes of signage and marking the streets?
I think one of our guests can speak to that. Jeff or Dave, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I think the question was, what's the purpose of marking the streets?
Yep.
So the purpose in a governor's study back from the 90s, a governor commission study back from the 90s showed that about 60% of folks who would like to ride are hesitant to ride on city streets, and the largest impediment is the lack of marked bike routes for them riding on the city streets. So they feel more safe, and they are more safe by riding on marked routes. Marked routes help raise awareness among both the cyclists and motorists that motorists and cyclists will be interacting with each other on those routes.
And this was proven by some type of study, sir?
Yes, there are all sorts of studies that you can reference.
Yep.
Just had a question. Obviously, I know it's going to cost us something up front to have Doug's people to shift them over, basically. It's not like we're hiring on additional staff, and I thank Bike Friendly Wisconsin for obviously donating the signs and the materials. What do you think, does Doug or anyone have an estimated cost? I mean, do the markings usually last 5 years in Wisconsin? Would we just touch it up here and there? I'm just trying to think, obviously I know from this study that we had Mr. Robach here, people are interested in kind of, cultural and recreational things being updated. It seems like this could potentially be a small price to pay, and it could be like a lasting thing. Do you know how much it would cost ongoing maintenance-wise with paint or things like that?
If I can jump in, I think it does show that at the bottom of this document here.
Sorry.
Is that correct, Doug? So it's
Correct.
every 3 years. The pavement markings would need to get redone about $5,000, and then the signage is about $600 every 15 years.
Correct.
Yep.
The repainting of the lines every 3 years, that's an estimate. It all depends on the road conditions, the traffic volumes, some may have to be repainted more often than others.
And the supplies for that maintenance, is that something that we eat then? I know they're doing the upfront costs. Okay.
That's up to you guys.
Okay. Thanks.
The ask and the offer from Bike Friendly is that it's a one-time upfront funded for the Orange Loop. So when Doug says it's up to you guys, if you authorize this tonight, again, the donation is for this $5,000 for this initial signage and street markings.
I'll just jump off of Alderman Kennedy. I agree that I think it's a good bang for our buck. I mean, we're not really putting forth too much. Granted, I know a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from your guys, but we really appreciate Bike Friendly for donating those materials, and I think that this will get a lot of use and longevity from throughout the community, which will be nice.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
I have a comment. We see before us the numbers for the orange loop, and we also see another loops, blue loop, purple, red. So is this like phase one of a multi-phase program or project that is going to come before us in the future? Or is this just a one-time, let's see what happens with the orange loop and see if we can go forward? What's the proposal?
The proposal is just for the orange loop.
Correct. There is a much larger scale picture here, but the effort that, and if Max wants to speak as well, he can, the effort that our engineering department put into the program so far was approving the orange loop, the destination, the signage, the paintings, that's what has been reviewed by our engineering department to this point. So it was to be implemented in phases, if that helps your question.
And I believe the idea was to see how well received it is within the community, if it's functioning the way it's supposed to, and if all that works well, then to try to possibly go forward with other parts of the plan. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, some of those other loops, they're not vetted through the engineering department, as Doug mentioned, and in some cases would actually need a road reconstruction, which is a long time out before a portion of that loop could be painted or signed. So I guess I can't stress enough that the proposal before you tonight is just the orange loop. It's not anything bigger than that. If another loop were to come down the road, that would have to come before you in the future as well.
I guess I would have another question towards the bike-friendly organization. Is it part of their proposal in the future to expand this system of loops that you have listed on this spreadsheet, or that is listed on the spreadsheet, including the other colored loops?
So I'll speak to that. Certainly, to the extent that we can drive the bike culture and see the results of the favorable results of the implementation of the orange loop, and granted that we can measure the increase in use of the surface streets for bicycle transportation, we would certainly advocate for implementation of the other loops in future years. We have currently got a commitment for supplies and materials for all of the loops that you see in front of you. So it's just a matter of how well the loops are adopted, the kind of use that they get, and then the city's ability to proceed with construction and implementation on the other loops. And of course, by the blessing of the Common Council.
Okay, thank you very much.
I do have one more question, sorry. I know that obviously we're assuming every 3 years we're going to repaint the lines or upkeep. Is there a part of this agreement that if Bike Friendly Wisconsin does donate these signs, say in 5 years, 8 years, nobody's biking anywhere, this isn't being used, are we committing through contractually that we would have to repaint these lines costing us $20,000 if we're these aren't being used?
No, not at all. Not only do we not know whether the orange loop is going to be wildly successful and spur on other loops, if the opposite of that is true and Doug is recommending as an operation tactic to remove failing signs and not repaint sharrows, I certainly hope that's not the case, but that could be the case in the converse.
So it's not a contractual obligation. If this isn't working, we're not being held to anything. Okay, thank you.
It does raise the question, though, that if this doesn't work, and now we have these sharrows that have been painted, we're either going to have to upkeep them, or we're going to have to actively erase them, because you just can't leave them there deteriorating, looking terrible. Fair enough?
Yeah, Doug probably can speak to the erasing of them. Painting over white paint with black does not work out so hot. I know that from the near hotel area, but I think they take care of themselves for the most part from deterioration and being scraped off by snowplow blades and traffic.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we do have a motion a second, so I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the orange loop for bike friendly, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
So to be clear, there's 2 opposed, correct? Berquist, Dolnick? Okay. Thank you so much. And we'll move on to item number 28. Introduction of preliminary resolution to vacate a portion of Schmidt Road from the north right-of-way line of East Washington Street to 400.7 feet south of the center of corner of Section 12 T11NR 19E, an east-west right-of-way for an unnamed road east of Schmidt Road and the northern portion of Rolfs Avenue by the Department of Development, City of West Bend. Jim.
Good evening. Tonight I'm just asking the council to reinitiate that initial introduction for the preliminary resolution so we can appropriately notify and publish the public hearing for the actual final action for the road dedication. So we're asking the council to change the date, which would have been tonight, to February 1st of 2021 to finish that vacation process.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Alan and Maddle. Any questions for Jim? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to reports. Number 29, a report by Alderman Butchlick regarding the Deer Management Committee meeting.
Yeah, we had a meeting on Wednesday, December 9th at 5 p.m. We had a brief recap of our 2019-2020 deer management program, which included a survey by USDA services and deer removal reviewed, with 151 deer actually observed during their unmanned infrared camera, with a total of 58 deer updated throughout January, February, and March. We also applied for an urban wildlife damage abatement grant, which is for $5,000. That would be the maximum we could receive, which will help us. We've applied for it each time, but each time we get closer for acceptance. Hopefully this will be the final one. The committee will be recommending to the council to approve a corporate service agreement with the USDA Wildlife Services for removal of deer from the previous 6 properties, including Regner Park, and the requests for that will be coming up in the near future. And that was pretty much it.
Sounds great. Any questions for Alderman Butchlick?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Justice?
I assume that request is going to be based on your survey, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounded like you're going to make the request no matter what. So you're going to wait on survey results?
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Anything else? Then I'll move on to a report by Alderman Berquist regarding the library board meeting. Take it away.
Thank you, sir. The last meeting of the library board was held on December 15th. One of the most important duties that the library board has is to approve the financials so that the library stays functional from month to month. We set a record this meeting as far as being one of the quickest meetings on record, because we took care of the financial business and then moved on to a couple other notes, and then prepared for the interviews for the upcoming selection of the new library director. So it was a pretty short meeting. But some of the things that came out of the meeting was the library director that is actually provided some information reference to the latest ad campaign that they were involved in, that identified that we actually increased usage by getting more people library cards. There was a Monarch library system program that we were involved in that involved billboards, and I think I've talked about it a couple of times in other meetings. But they actually had some statistics that showed that we increased usage and increased people getting library cards. One of the things that we did identify was trying to figure out if those people, if it was directly related to the ad campaign, or if it was just people that wanted to get a new library card. So we came up with the idea of maybe adding a survey to the application for the library card as one way of generating that kind of information. We received an update on the rec center construction. There's some work going on there that's really nice to know, and they should be completing that on schedule. The library president spoke, and some of the things that she mentioned, there were 2 items. One was the county board, because they provide some assistance to the to the library. They are looking at representation on the board. That's an item to be discussed at a later date. We're also looking at some bylaw changes to allow us the ability to approve action via electronic actions rather than calling another meeting and having everybody get together. We could just do it via electronic. There was no new business, again, because we're preparing for the interviews, and the next meeting is scheduled for January 19th.
Sounds good. Any questions?
You guys any closer to coming up with a director over there, or what?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We're down to, excuse me, we're down to the final candidates, and we have interviews scheduled for, again, this week, and again, later in January.
Cool. Thanks, Brett.
Yep.
Anything else for Brett? Otherwise, I'll move on to item number 31, closed session. Entertain a motion to adjourn into closed session pursuant to state statute section 19.85 para 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. And this is for the evaluation of the city administrator. Look for motion.
Motion to approve.
Second. Thank you, Alan and Dolnick, and we'll have a roll call vote. Steph?
Alderman Butchlick?
Aye.
Alderman Allen?
Aye.
Alderman Berquist?
Aye.
Alderman Kaler? Alderman Dolnick?
Aye.
Alderman Model?
Aye.
Alderman Kennedy? Aye. You are in closed session.
Thank you. We will be adjourning this meeting from closed session, so I'll open it up if there's any announcements for the good of the order.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's to everybody.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, absolutely. Anything else? I'm sure we're all happy that 2020 is done. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Window in my office. Sure.